Hello everyone, it's just about 12 o'clock and we'll be starting the webinar in about 1 minute. We're just going to wait for a few more people to join, so please stand by. Okay, good afternoon, good morning. Welcome everyone to the webinar. What is RPA? Quick test, RPA, robotic process automation. So let's talk more about that. So welcome again. My name is Chris Drager. I am an account executive at RoboWorks. We provide RPA solutions. And what we're going to talk about today is what is RPA? How can it help your organization? We have an RPA Diagnostic Checklist, which is really helpful in evaluating which processes to automate. Then we're going to talk a little bit about ROI for RPA. It's a really interesting way to see how you can recoup your investment for this type of automation. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So feel free during the presentation to type your questions in, and at the end I'll be able to answer them. We've allocated 15 minutes at the end. We'll go till the bottom of the hour, 12:30, and then we'll have 15 minutes for questions. So what is RPA? And how does it fit into the journey? So today we're all hearing about robots. The robots are coming. I need to get automated. Where do I start? It's a little bit overwhelming. We know it's happening. So with this slide here, it talks a little bit about how RPA fits in that larger landscape. So going from left to right, on the left-hand side is the way many companies are working today, where there's really no automation, at least not in this context. And the next phase of it is rules-based automation, and then it moves into judgment-based. So rules-based is what RPA is all about. It uses digital robots. They're not really robots. It's really a piece of software, and it automates repetitive processes. So these RPA robots, as we like to call them, they can't think. They're not judgment-based. They really just rely on very clear instructions, if this, then that, and, or, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no thinking involved. The next phases of automation start to get more sophisticated. The next stage would be cognitive computing, which simulates human thought, machine learning, which looks at big data and finds patterns, and then of course artificial intelligence, where they're really starting to think like human beings. But today we're going to focus on RPA, robotic process automation. So what is it? It's emulating a human worker's repetitive tasks through a user interface. So said another way, human workers are sitting on computers, right? If we all go to different offices, we see people sitting at their computer, pressing their keypad. They're opening up emails, they're logging into ERPs, they're copying information, pasting information, et cetera, et cetera. That's what these robots do. It mimics those tasks. What it's not an industrial robot. It doesn't look like a robot. It doesn't look like R2-D2. It's not artificial intelligence, as I mentioned a moment ago. So these robots don't think. They just react to instructions. And they're also not a digital workforce replacing human beings. And I know that's the fear out there in the marketplace sometimes, but really what we find is people love these robots. What it does is it makes the human worker's job easier because they don't have to sit there and process repetitive, mundane tasks. They can have the robot do that for them, and then the human worker can work on more challenging projects and more value-added types of projects that are going to help the company, which, by the way, can help the company gain even more ROI, but that's just an added piece of it. So what are the benefits? There are so many benefits to RPA. I'll start here at the top here, ease of entry. So what does that mean? As I mentioned a few minutes ago, when you're thinking about getting into automation and you have a long-term plan, starting with RPA is a really easy way to get started because it's an affordable investment. It's not too expensive. It's not overly complicated. And it's not intrusive on the infrastructure. In fact, it's the opposite. It works very, very well with existing technologies and existing IT infrastructure. So it's pretty easy to enter automation with RPA. The robots are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year. They never take a break. They never get sick. So it's constantly processing tasks all the time, which leads into higher productivity, right? If you've got digital workers that are working those kind of hours, you're going to be highly, highly productive. They're also accurate. We all know that with humans, we all make errors. So there's going to be human error when a person is processing a task. But if you've got a robot doing it, that robot is just going to follow the instructions, and therefore you're going to have accurate outputs. Compliance is another benefit of the software robots because the robots will leave a trail behind when they complete a task. You can write instructions and say, okay, robot, now I want you to document everything that you've done, list any exceptions or errors that came in place, list every task that was completed, and therefore there's an audit trail for everything that the robot's doing. So that's going to help with compliance. Employee retention, another benefit of RPA. And that's because, as I mentioned, even though a lot of people are scared that the bots are coming for their jobs, we really find quite the opposite. Especially a younger generation of workers who grew up with technology and really enjoy using technology, they say, hey, let the bot do it. Let me do something more interesting. So happier employees is a result of RPA. Customers are happier too. Why? Because everything's being processed quickly. There aren't any mistakes. The accuracy is improved, and they're being responded to fast. Therefore, the customers are happier. Low initial investment. I mentioned it's a very low-cost way to start automation. And quick ROI. And we're going to talk more about ROI in an upcoming slide. And you'll see that you can get a very quick or long-term return on investment by investing in RPA. And again, I'll talk more about that. And then competitive advantage. And I say that because if you've got higher productivity, better accuracy, you're compliant, and you've got happy customers and happy employees and ROI, you're going to have a competitive advantage. So those are the benefits of RPA. So just to give you all a really tangible idea of what the robots are doing, these are very real life examples of what a robot could be doing in any given task. They could log into an application, so they can log into your email system. They can log into your intranet. They can log basically into any website where you go in every day and complete a task. It can connect to system APIs, copy and paste information. It can move folders around. It can work with OCR, optical character recognition software, and read PDFs and copy information from there. Opens emails and attachments. It can scrape data from the web. And then in addition to opening and closing and copying and pasting, the robots can also make calculations. So the best example of that would be in an accounts payable example. So let's say that the robot is processing an accounts payable transaction. Obviously, with accounts payable, what the robot is going to do is going to receive an invoice, and it has to compare that invoice to a signed purchase order and make sure that the information is correct and that the dollar amount is correct. So this robot is going to perhaps log into an Oracle system and look for a purchase order. And then it will log into an email system and it will receive an invoice. It will scan the invoice. It will look at the purchase order number, the vendor, the address of the vendor, and the dollar amount. Then the robot can go into the Oracle system, look for the matching PO number, make sure the vendor information is the same, the address is the same, and then it can make the calculation. So at this point, the robot can look at the dollar amount that was approved and signed off on the purchase order, and then it can look at the dollar amount of the invoice. If it's the same, or if it's within, for example, 2%, it might be 2% higher, you can instruct the robot however you like. Let's say in this example, the rule is 2%. Then you have your if-or situation. So, okay, robot, if the dollar amount of the invoice is within 2% of what was approved on the purchase order, now I want you to log into my banking website and generate payment and execute the payment to this vendor, and then send an alert to the accounts payable manager and let him or her know that this payment has been paid, authorized and paid. Alternatively, let's say that the amount of the invoice exceeds 2% of what was approved on the purchase order. In that case, the robot has different instructions. Now the robot is could do a couple things. Again, we would program the robot to do whatever the organization wants. One example might be, as soon as it finds a discrepancy, the robot will go and generate an email to the accounts payable manager and advise him or her that there's a discrepancy. This way, the accounts payable manager is spending their time on the ones that have a discrepancy, but isn't having to spend a lot of time on the ones that are matching up properly. The other thing the robot could do is, instead of alerting the accounts payable manager in real time, the robot can just create a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet can list all of the transactions and indicate on there whether or not they were successful, or just create an exceptions report and send a whole list off to the accounts payable manager. So that's a real life example of how a robot would process an accounts payable invoice. So here are some more examples of what the robots can do, and I couldn't even fit them all on a slide because there are so many. These are some of the more popular ones. Accounts payable, I mentioned. HR, new hire orientation, is another example. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Data entry, reconciliations, etc. And as you learn more about RPA and how it works, most people think about their own situation and their own challenges, and usually they say, hey, I bet the bot could do this, I bet the bot could do that. Because again, anything that anyone is doing at a computer, pushing buttons, the robot can do. Okay, so just a little bit about the market, just to put it in context for you. RPA is one of the fastest growing segments of global enterprise software. It's very, very popular in Asia Pacific and Europe, and it's growing very, very quickly here in the United States. So if you haven't heard of it yet, or if you're relatively new to RPA, you'll see that you'll be hearing more and more about it. Okay, now that we know what RPA is, robotic process automation, how can it help your organization? So here's the thing with RPA. It can be used in so many different departments within a company. Sales and marketing is a good example. Finance, as I mentioned, is one of the most popular use cases for RPA. And you'll note here that I mentioned SAP, Oracle, etc. For sales and marketing, I would mention Salesforce, because interesting to know is that there are pre-built robots that already work very well with a lot of these legacy technology systems, or Salesforce may not be legacy, but very popular technology systems, since so many people use them. And being that that's the case, the robot doesn't need to be given instructions from scratch. They're pre-built instructions that can then be customized to any particular customer environment. And then you can see supply chain. So companies like supply chains, it's helpful because so many different people are touching any given transaction. So the robot can really streamline that process. The robots work really good in kind of old healthcare, insurance companies, any kind of company that may have like an old ERP system or a somewhat older infrastructure of technology, because the software robots just work so well with existing technologies. It's not like you have to go in and replace an ERP and change everything up. It's not intrusive at all. All it will do is it will just log into the ERP and take the information that it needs and then log back out. IT is another good example. Imagine all the time IT managers at organizations are spending on things like password resets, antivirus administration, storage capacity. These are all tasks that RPA can do quite easily. HR is also another very popular use case. Resume filtering, we get a lot of inquiries about that one. Let's say, for example, that you're recruiting a new hire and a college degree is mandatory. What the robot can do, because we know HR people sometimes get overwhelmed with all the resumes they get, is they can tell the robot, scan all these resumes, and if they don't have a 4-year degree and whatever it might be, I don't even want to see it. So it saves all that time that the HR manager would previously have spent reading through every single resume. So those are some examples of how RPA can be used in different departments within an organization. So how do you choose which process to automate? Where do you start? So this is what we call our RPA Diagnostic Checklist. And these are all the things you're going to think about when you think about where to start. So repetitive. You want to automate a repetitive process that has a predefined set of rules. So as I've been talking about, the robots don't think, they don't make judgments. So you need to have a process that's going to be if A, then B, and or, etc., etc. You also want something that's standardized. So if the robot is going to process accounts payable, for example, if some of the invoices are coming in through an email and other invoices are coming in through a different email address, for example, maybe a different department, then that's fine, but you'd have to give the robot 2 sets of instructions. Receive the invoice from this email and then go receive the invoice from a different function. But you need to have some kind of trigger that's going to initiate the robot to start the process. Reason-based, again, I'm repeating myself, but it's just something really fundamental to RPA, is that it's nothing judgmental. It's all rules-based. So if you think about a process that you could potentially automate, you have to keep in mind that it has to be based on predefined rules. Now, that's not to say that there are different robots. There are robots called attended robots and unattended robots. So an unattended robot would have to be on his own doing the process. But an attended one, for example, it could go and retrieve the invoice, to stay with the same example. And if there's a discrepancy, what the robot could do is send an email to the accounts payable manager, and the accounts payable manager might say, oh, it's approved anyway. So then it would tell the robot, go ahead and process the payment. So that would be an example of an attended robot. So the robot's not making the decision, but it's stopping for a moment and getting some human interaction in order to complete the transaction. So you also want to process a process that is stable. If you are going to build a robot that works with Salesforce, but you're in the process of using the new version of Salesforce or changing your layout pages, it would not be the best time to build the robot, because if and when that changes, the robot would have to be given new instructions. So as long as everything stays the same, the robot will be fine. But if anything changes within the system that it's accessing, if there's a new box that has to be checked or a new screen that it needs to go to, the robot would just have to be told to do that. And no voice commands as of today. The robots are not able to respond to audio. That will be coming in the future, I'm sure. But at the moment, just think about keystrokes, anything that you're doing on your computer. And finally, so the other thing that's really, really important to think about when you're choosing which processes to automate are your ROI goals. So some organizations say, hey, I just need a really quick win, right? I just need to get a quick ROI. Other companies, ROI is equally important to them, but they really are looking at this program and automation in the long term. And they say, listen, we've got a 3-year plan. We're going to have full artificial intelligence over the next few years. So therefore, it's more important to spend more time really strategizing on how to set this up in the long term and get the most ROI out of it over a longer period of time. But just, it's very important to remember that you have to pick a process that people are high volume, right? People, there are a lot of people working on it and spending a lot of time on it, because that's where you're going to get your ROI. You might have some tasks that you say, hey, this could definitely be automated. But if it really doesn't take that long to do it and it's not costing the organization that much money to process, then it won't be worth the investment. So moving on, I'm going to show you a demo. So what you're going to see here is we had a client, a VP of marketing, and she found a government website, and it had contact information, people's names, email addresses, phone numbers, and she wanted to take that information and turn it into a marketing list. But there were so many names on it. I think it might have been 8,000 or so, that it would have taken weeks, months, for marketing coordinators to get this done for her. So we built a bot to extract the information and scrape the website for her. So I'm going to play the demo.
Welcome to RoboWorks, a UiPath certified partner and leader in robotics process automation. From the initial project discovery meeting through project completion and beyond, the RoboWorks team of RPA professionals will help your business simplify its processes, deliver better products and services, and achieve goals faster. We're here with you every step of the way during your automation journey. From our team at RoboWorks, we welcome you to this video demonstration of how our bots work.
In this short video, you will see a bot in action, customized to perform a mundane task with unmatched pace and accuracy. This simple bot was designed to operate multiple applications, navigate the GSA database, and extract contractor information into an Excel spreadsheet. A great characteristic is that these bots can run during off hours, providing you with a report when you return to work the next day. Notice how quickly this is done with 0 errors. 12 hours, this bot created over 8,000 contact records, populating over 100,000 data points. The output is a spreadsheet, but more importantly is a valuable marketing resource containing information on thousands of potential clients. The value of this list comes from the organized display of prospects' names, telephone numbers, and email addresses. The sales and marketing team can now use this report to develop their next plan of action. They will no longer spend time gathering and organizing these reports, but can be refocused on engaging in more value-adding activities. This example is just one use case and can be catered to individual needs of many business processes. Now that you have an idea of how these bots work, where can you see them assisting you in your operations? Allow our team to lead you on your automation journey, select the best task to automate, and let the bot do it.
Let the bot do it. So you just saw a robot in action, and again, that's just one application of web scraping, a little bit different than the example that I described earlier, but it gives you another idea of the robot's capabilities. So this is just a little bit of information about how to get started. At RoboWorks, we use this quite a bit, the crawl, walk, run scenario. And the reason is you just want to start slow and get everything running smoothly before running too far with it. So you'll notice in the crawl stage, you're going to start with one process and something that's highly repetitive and high volume. As I mentioned earlier, the higher the volume, the better the ROI that you're going to get. You want a stable process. You're better off starting off with a process that does not have human interaction. In that accounts payable example that I used, there was one example that had human interaction and one that did not. And then something that's non-complex. So what does that mean? The accounts payable example was pretty non-complex. It's maybe 5, 6, maybe 10 steps. Log in, scan, copy, paste, a small calculation at the end, not too complex. The robot can handle processes that are highly complex, but it's better not to start with those, just start with something simple first. So then when you get into your walk stage, now you're going to start automating 2 to 5 processes. You can start looking at tasks that are somewhat repetitive, maybe not high volume, but medium volume, and you get the idea. Eventually, when you've got 5, 10, 15 processes running, you're literally running. At that point, we usually apply another piece of software called Orchestrator that helps manage all of the robots from one central location. It gets very sophisticated at that point. And then the fly scenario is obviously going into the intelligent type of automation that I mentioned early on, the cognitive computing, artificial intelligence. So crawl, walk, run. Pitfalls. So what are the potential pitfalls for RPA? One is by not selecting the right processes. So we looked at this checklist to identify which processes are the best ones to start with. If you start with something that's too complicated, or it's something that doesn't really take that much time to automate, then you're not going to have the success that you're hoping to get. Secondly is trying to automate too many steps. So again, in the accounts payable example, there aren't that many steps involved. It isn't very complicated. If you have 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 steps, it can become too complex, and you might want to look at 2 different robots or 3 different robots. But it's almost like biting off more than you can chew while you're getting started. Stakeholder engagement is very important, and that kind of goes along with number 4, considering it only as an IT topic. meaning oftentimes we'll acquire new software and say, I'll give it to IT, they'll take care of it. RPA does not work well in that environment. It's usually working within one of these departments I mentioned earlier. So if it's the HR department, for example, then the HR team needs to be very involved, because they are the ones who are actually processing these tasks. And they're the ones that need to be involved in documenting them and instructing, working with the RPA vendor to build the instructions, etc. It's also important to get C-level engagement and HR, not to confuse it, but HR should also be involved just from an employee engagement standpoint. As long as everyone is aware of what the robots are and how they're going to help them, then the employees will be happy about it. It's just that you need to have some kind of change management strategy in place. And then you can't underestimate the skills required. That's just because RPA is really starting to take hold in the United States, and there is a demand for these skills. It's not the kind of project where you can say, just hire somebody to do it, because you need people who understand how to build it, and you just have to be mindful of that early on, that there is a shortage of skills out there for RPA. So those are some of the pitfalls if not done correctly. And ROI. So it looks like a lot of information on the slide, so I'm going to try to take you through it. It's not really complicated. It's just a question of understanding how it works. So in order to get ROI, you need to, first of all, understand how much is it costing you right now to process these tasks. So I'll stick with my accounts payable. Let's say, for example, let's say you have 3 full-time accounts payable coordinators in a company, and they're spending 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, processing the accounts payables. Right there, you know how much you're spending, right? You know how many people there are, you know how much you're paying them. So the whole idea is just figuring out how much it's costing you today to process those tasks. Then you need to understand how much the robot's going to cost and what's going to be the investment. And it depends. It depends on a lot of things, many of which I've been talking about today. One is whether it's a simple task or a complex task. So I've been talking about that. If the robot is being asked to take 10 steps to complete an accounts payable transaction, that's pretty simple, right? So it's not going to be too complicated to map out the process and document everything and then give the instructions to the robot. But if, on the other hand, you're doing a very complex process where it takes 50 steps and the robot has to do multiple calculations and the robot has to log into a dozen different locations in order to get content and copy and paste, then it's just more complicated, like anything else. So it's going to take more time to document the process and formalize the process and then give the instructions to the robot and the testing. So basically, the more complex the task, the more expensive the investment will be for the RPA robot. And then just some other costs to consider. One is where the software is hosted. It can be on-premise at the client organization. It can be in the cloud, a private cloud, a public cloud. But it does have to be hosted somewhere. And then there's support requirements. We have some clients who pay for tier 1 service 24/7. Other ones just require support Monday through Friday, maybe 9 to 5, something along those lines. But that's just another thing that would impact the investment. This note here about indirect savings is just kind of a side note. I mentioned it briefly earlier in the presentation here. Once you've got software robots that are in place processing tasks, then you've got these workers. So what can you do with these human workers? Hopefully you can redeploy them into a different project, a value-added task, And that in itself can bring the organization better ROI. You could just not replace workers if the workers leave, and then you'll definitely have savings, and you'll benefit in ROI if the human worker is no longer on the payroll. So those are the influencers on your calculation to figure out what your ROI is. And then this is just a little side note here, nothing complicated. Like most technology, the investment in the first year is going to be higher just because of the implementation costs. So your ROI will be healthy, but in year 2, your ROI will be even better because your implementation fees are already paid. So just worth keeping in mind as you're calculating and thinking about your ROI. Okay, I'm running out of time here. Perfect timing. We've got about 7 minutes. And I'm just going to ask my colleague on the line here if we have any questions, because I will open it up for questions. Okay, this is a very specific question about building integration with cloud-based partners. ShipStation, Shopify. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there are probably pre-built integrations for some of those, if not every single one. As I mentioned earlier, the more popular technologies out there are pre-built bots already, and there's more and more being done every day. We partner at RoboWorks with UiPath, and they have a whole community of developers who are out there testing, building, sharing knowledge, and there's quite a few pre-built integrations out there. Okay, do I have any more questions? Nope, I don't see any more questions coming through. So let me just share my last slide with you here, and then I'll give everyone back 5 more minutes in their day. Here. So very quickly, again, I'm from RoboWorks. We work with UiPath, Automation Anywhere, all the major software providers. We are the implementers, where they're the software providers. And I also just wanted to introduce very quickly our proof of concept, which is a really good way to test the robots at a very, very low investment, as low as $3,000, $5,000, $6,000. So if you were to identify a highly repetitive but non-complex process for a proof of concept, RoboWorks could design and build it in as little as 2 weeks. And again, it's a very low investment, so that's something to think about. My contact information is here. I will reach out to you after the webinar, and I'll send you a recording to this event, and I'll send you a hard copy of the presentation. So you'll have my contact information, and if you'd like to learn more about it, I would love to speak with you. So having said that, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.